All right. The purpose of this lesson is to help you see how history is understood. We'll take a look at historical evidence, what it is, and we'll learn to distinguish between primary and secondary sources of evidence. We'll look at how evidence alone cannot answer complex questions. We'll look at how to use the analysis of evidence to make historical arguments. Now, the study of history starts with asking questions. We start with simple questions, like what happened? When? Who was involved? Where did it happen? As you watch this video, throughout our discussion, you'll need to complete the notes template included to the right. The information you need to record will be found in yellow text boxes outlined in red. When you see this text, feel free to pause the video in order to complete your notes. Take a moment now and answer this first question in your notes. Now, historians are like detectives. We scour our surroundings for evidence and for answers to our questions. Evidence is that body of facts or information that indicates whether a belief about the past is true. Now again, take a moment to record this definition in your notes. So evidence may take on different forms. Much of the evidence we have of the past is found in written form, like in books or journals. Other evidence is in physical form, like bones or artifacts or even photographs. Recently, we've been able to collect evidence in spoken form, recordings of interviews or videos. So we find that evidence may be in written form, as physical objects, or as spoken recordings. Now, when new evidence is discovered, whether it's an artifact or a document, it's important to establish the validity of that evidence. Individuals have been known to counterfeit evidence to convince others of a certain point of view. To ensure these new findings are valid, historians try to establish a few specific facts. First, can we verify the date the object was made? Historians employ scientific methods like radioactive carbon dating, or they compare the object with other objects that may have been found in the same layer of debris. Second, historians try to establish the reliability of the witness who created the object. What was his or her purpose? Is there any reason this witness would want to embellish the truth? Is there a bias present? Third, what is the context in which the object was made? Is this a religious object? What was it used for? If it's a document, is it a record of a purchase, or is it a personal journal? What is the context in which the evidence was produced? And fourth, is the discovery of the object reliable? Who discovered it? Is there an underlying purpose for which someone may want to counterfeit the discovery? Answering these types of questions will help us know whether the evidence presented can be trusted. So, as we discuss evidence of the past, it's important to recognize the difference between evidence that comes from a primary source and evidence that comes from a secondary source. Primary evidence originates from the time studied. Some examples may include photographs taken at that time, written journals, recordings, newspapers, letters. Evidence may be found in a building's architecture or in an artifact. All of these examples were made at the time we are interested in studying. They are primary sources. Secondary evidence is produced after the time we are studying. This evidence generally comes from other historians. Some examples include textbooks, video documentaries, movies, information found on the internet, or even historical novels. This is secondary evidence because it did not exist at the time we are studying. Now, it's important to note that one type of evidence is not necessarily better than another. Primary evidence, like a first-hand account of an event, may be found in a journal or letter and could be exaggerated. Often individuals who experience an event are tempted to add details in order to complete the story. Whereas a historian who spent years in research for a book or a film may have had access to many pieces of evidence, which result in a clearer picture of what actually happened. This finished product may be far more accurate than what we find in primary accounts. So, evidence should not be taken for granted. One should distinguish between primary evidence and secondary evidence, and one should establish the reliability, the context, and the bias that may be associated with that evidence. Having evidence starts to answer our questions. Simple questions lead to more complex questions. We start by asking what happened and when. Where did it happen? Who was involved? These questions are simple. Evidence may give us straightforward answers. Questions like how did it happen or why are more complex. Evidence alone does not necessarily answer these complex questions. Complex questions require analysis and argument. We must look at evidence and think about it. Ponder over what it means, and then come up with an idea that explains how something happened or why. The English historian V.H. Galbraith said, "All our histories are no more than hypotheses to explain how the world around us came to be." Let's take a look at what is involved in analyzing evidence. What is historical analysis? As we examine the details that are found in evidence, we get an idea of what happened. Historical analysis is a detailed examination of evidence that supports an idea in answer to a complex question. Good analysis explains the importance of evidence. Analysis interprets evidence in order to form a narrative. Good analysis, again, explains the importance of evidence and interprets evidence in order to form a narrative. We analyze the evidence in order to tell a story about what happened. Now, two people coming from different contexts may look at the same evidence, analyze it differently, and come up with two competing explanations of what happened. For example, in the beginnings of the United States of America, the Continental Army fought in the Revolutionary War against the English redcoats. As historians, we may collect accounts from both sides of what happened. One historian may use the evidence to outline a narrative that shows the perspective of the American side. This is what happened. Another may use the evidence to express a narrative that presents a different view of why the war was fought. No, this is what happened. History is understood as multiple competing arguments of the evidence are presented. Any study of history is based in the ability of the historian to make an argument in order to answer complex questions. As many historians present competing perspectives, we gain a vivid picture of what happened in the past. If you're going to have success in studying the history of the United States, you must be able to view evidence, to analyze it, and gain an idea of what happened, and then present that idea in the form of an argument. So let's wrap up our lesson by taking a quick look at what makes a good argument. A good argument will take a stand on an issue. It will apply the evidence to answer why something occurred. A good argument seeks to persuade a specific point of view. You want to show that the evidence supports your explanation. And a good argument is more than just a description or summary. Okay, let's take a moment now and make sure that you've completed your notes page. When you're done, click on the Submit button. If any of your answers show up in red, check the video again for the correct answer, and then resubmit. In our next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can develop a thesis statement in the presentation of our argument.